Hi everyone, good evening. Let us talk about or let's start the session. Okay. And today, till now, what we understood is what is GHG gases, what is carbon accounting, and how it works, and how it impacting the overall Earth. Right. That is what we understood. But what governments are doing, we did not discuss as of now, or what world community is doing we did not discuss, right? So to discuss that, today's topic or today we are going to deep dive into regulatory landscapes, right? How regulatory landscapes are changing the whole world scenario or shaping the carbon accounting journey. Okay, so here we will understand that what kind of regulations or agreements that is happening or that is going to be happen, and the other thing is what kind of regulatory norms that is there that are available that are pertinent to the carbon accounting, and then we'll be understanding that how carbon accounting is being shaped by the different regulatory regulatory bodies, or you can say regulatory uh, regulations basically that is there, right? So we'll talk about that. So do you have anything in mind that these are the regulations or these are the things, these are the agreements that did happen, and due to that, carbon accounting is getting pace? Do you have anything in that line? If no, let's talk about that. Okay. So let's talk about what is happening or the key commitments and regulations regarding the carbon accounting. Okay, so these are the four major player, you can say, or major thing that is there. Like first one is, those are the things that are shaping the world. Okay, so first out of them is Paris Agreement. Second is net zero target. Third is ETS, and fourth is CBAM. Okay, when you look at all four, okay, so if you look at all four, CBAM, or you can say Paris Agreement and net zero targets, these two are basically related to how world is shaping, how what kind of a commitment that world is having towards mitigating the carbon, right? The second part of it is how can we achieve that? So that is there, or that is what we will understand it, with respect to the ETS and CBAM. Okay, so here if you talk about carbon related regulations and other applications are generally unfolding. It is still in a pace, or you can say it is still in coming up. So if you look at the transition that is happening, like first CDP did came, then TCFD did came, and they shaped the primarily the governance thing and calculation of scope 1, 2, and 3. Now after that SBTI came, right? SBTI stands for Science Based Target Initiative. So those, that particular body tries to mitigate or tries to reduce the emission, or tries to set up target, okay, based on the Paris Agreement, right? So that is what SBTI did. Then the time comes, then the people started talking about the renewable energy RE100. Okay, so that came in picture, and so on. It is going on right now. Now people started talking about the CBAM, the new normal, or you can say new mechanism that is coming from the west, right? So that kind of a progress, that kind of a that kind of a evolution that we have seen till now. Okay, so let us understand the basics of how regulations are shaping up, and what kind of an impact it will have in our future journey towards reaching net zero target or getting into carbon negative future. Okay, so that is where let's talk about the Paris Agreement first. So how many of you are aware about the Paris Agreement? What it is?
Every year, there is a conference of parties where all the United Nations members join. Paris Agreement came out of the Conference of Party, the COP meeting, which happened in 2015, and that was the first time climate change was discussed.
Okay.
The the discussion was basically around that the rise in temperature should be limited to 1.5 degrees higher than the pre-industrial levels, and all the United Nations members committed to achieving that by 2050 with the interim target of keeping it to 2 degrees in between.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? No. So Paris Agreement, as was mentioning, it is about. I mean, it get started, or it got recognized in 2015. And before that, also, we were talking about the climate change as a whole, like how can we mitigate, what kind of impact that we have. So in that scenario only, we have in 1997, we had our Kyoto Protocol, according to which ETS, I mean, UK ETS used to go, perform their work, right? So since 1997 only, we started talking about, so all these COPs, Conference of Parties, is basically revolving around climate change, right? So there people talk about, I mean, mostly they used to talk about, or the highlights of every COP is either finance or climate change. Okay, so finance also revolves around the climate change because it talks about the loss and damage in those uh COPs, or how can we support the nation who may not be able to produce or reproduce the innovative technologies, right? So that kind of a decision we used to take, or the world used to take in those COPs, like Conference of Parties, right? So Paris Agreement did happen in 2015 in COPs 21, and it got implemented in 2016. Okay. Uh, the negotiation was going on since I think 13 or 14, 13. Like it is a negotiation that were between the developing nation and developed nation, because ultimately developed nation has to support developing nation. How are they supporting? What kind of a finances they will be arranging? What sort of a help? How will they be helping developing nations? Right. So that is where all these carbon credits and other financing mechanism did came in picture, right? And still it is unfolding like financing mechanisms. Okay, so that is where we are shifting towards sustainable, clean development mechanism to the sustainable development mechanism. Okay, so that is a different thing, like you can search about it, but yes, that is happening. Again, the net zero target is another key pillar, you can say, in climate change, right? So in climate change, carbon accounting, or you can say net zero target is a key pillar, or while mitigating, or to shape the carbon accounting, net zero is playing a very vital role, because to achieve the net zero target, you require to have a well defined, accurate carbon calculation, right? So that is why net zero is also shaping the world of carbon accounting. Now, the third is emission trading system. So emission trading system is a market-based cap and trade mechanism that shapes, or you can say that linearly tries to reduce the carbon in a particular industry based on the net zero target that we are having for each and every country, right? So a country will adopt ETS, like India is going to adopt the emission trading system in 2026, right? That we know, I mean, we know it as a CCTS, carbon credit trading schemes, right? So that is going to take place in 2026 for India, right? So ETS is nothing but there is a cap, and if you are exceeding that cap, you have to pay some price for that, right? So ETS mechanism work towards reducing the carbon emission. If you would like to reduce the carbon emission, again you have to calculate the emission, right? You have to calculate what is the scope 1, 2, and 3, then only you can reduce it. And that is what ETS used to, you can say, forcefully used to uh, reduce the carbon emission. Okay. Now the fourth one is, or the last one is CBAM, like carbon border adjustment mechanism, that is coming from the EU basically. So EU is talking about different mechanisms or different rules and regulations. One of them is CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism. According to them, since we are not manufacturing everything by our own, and we are consuming from the all, I mean, we are consuming uh, other things from all around the world, there is a possibility of a carbon leakage, like, and hence we would like to have this carbon border adjustment mechanism, right? So I mean, CBAM used to talk about. Okay. So do you have any question, anything here? If nothing, let's talk about the key objectives of a Paris Agreement. Any question, anything?
So can I ask something?
Yes, sir, please.
Mm, Avinash, so see, first of all, like we had in CDM,
Okay.
every body who had every country which was a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol, on them the CDM was applicable, whether they were developing or developed countries.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, whether they were what do you call them? Schedule the Annex One country,
Next one and next two.
non-Annex One
Yeah.
countries. So um, Paris Agreement, I mean, even the big emitters, US, China, they were all signatories to the Clean Development Mechanism, and which was based on a market-based mechanism. The countries' governments were not liable to pay, but the industries would pay as per the amount of carbon credits they were buying
Yes, yes, yes.
from the developing countries, right? Now, what is the status of the Paris Agreement? Because it is quite confusing. Some countries, though they have signed, when the elections have happened, the next government has come and then they have refused to adhere. For example, in the United States, President Trump was initially, when Barack Obama had signed, okay, but when President Trump came, he said, I don't recognize the Paris Agreement. So, what exactly is the status, and how legally binding can this agreement be? Like how can it be binding upon any country? That is what is a little nebulous, in the current scenario.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, that is uh, a doubtful thing that we can say, because uh, United Nations do not say, or the Conference of Parties do not put any kind of a penalty over any country, if they are not, or if they are withdrawing any kind of, or withdrawing their agreement, right? So there is
Yes,
no
so see,
penalty kind of a.
what is the legality, or what is the authority of that agreement?
Authority of agreement is just that it is from United Nations. Anyone, any country can withdraw from that. But since looking at the different kind of scientific researches that has been done by the IPCC, and the kind of temperature rise we are seeing in our atmosphere, everyone is feeling that climate change is real and we should act upon that. And that is why government is kind of pressurized by the social groups, It is not coming out from anyone else, right? So it is from the social groups that are. So if you look at the companies who are transition towards, so let's say I'm talking about the Chevron or the Shell, right? I mean, not talk about Shell, but talk about the Chevron. That is a American company. Now they have this budget. They have allocated that they will be investing $8 billion by 2028, right? Now they have committed in 2023. They have spent something. They have roadmap. They have initiated their hydrogen projects, carbon capture, utilization, and storage process, right? So all of them they have initiated. Now, once they have marched towards something, they cannot come back so easily. It is not about the government. It is about a movement that has started from the social group, or you can say coming out from the different companies. And hence, the
Avinash
validation
sir,
or the kind of a pressure that
I,
government,
I
or you can
I
say,
agree, Avinash sir, but see, question is, those are all at best persuasive objectives, morally
so
persuasive objectives.
probably you might be knowing that it is just a binding. I mean, it is non-binding agreement. It is nothing like binding agreement that you should do it. You might be aware.
Well, that is what I'm keen to know. Like, what is the binding in that? I mean, today,
No, there is no binding thing in there. It is
if
just
a
about
major
countries'
polluter,
responsibility.
if a major emitter like US says, I don't recognize it, tomorrow
Yes.
morning somebody else may also say that. When
They may say
when
that.
certain boundaries are getting pushed, like we are seeing, political upheavals happening in the world of today. Anybody may say that, yeah, okay, I don't recognize this. I mean, it might be used as a negotiation tool for other political agendas. So, how do you say that the objectives of X agreement, either net zero or CBAM or Paris agreement, are binding? There is, I mean, what is the in clean development mechanism? At least in Kyoto Protocol, we had some this. Now here there is
No, no, so
nothing as
nowhere it is like that. I mean, any of the UN agreements, there is nothing like you are binded by. So if you talk about either IMF or any kind of a political things, if you are giving something or if you are taking something from them, so why UN is not interfering in Gaza or Palestine? Why they are just looking from the back? I mean, that is a political thing that you cannot argue. I mean, in that sense, because it is made by the countries. And since countries are not able to, or since countries are not serious about any kind of a binding, then we cannot say anything. Let's say there is a non-proliferation agreement between the nations, right? If, let's say, someone, I mean, nuclear nations like non-proliferation. So if there is an agreement, that is it. Let's say like what US did with Japan, India has started doing with Pakistan, or Pakistan has started doing with any country. What will happen? There is nothing, there is nothing like some legal boundary or something set for that, right? So any UN agreement is not uh, bounded by any kind of a legalization or legal things. You might be, I mean, aware about that.
so it is totally dependent on the wish of that particular.
Conference of parties, it is all the parties that agrees that okay, we will be doing it. Do you know that Kyoto Protocol hasn't been recognized by US till 2004, though it was started in 1997? If you look at the, I mean, newses that were coming at those time, they were like uh, I mean, the developing countries are negotiating on different parameters, that they were saying that. So newses were like that developing countries are negotiating.
Nee, sir, that agreed. See, US signed in 2004, which was a very big event, and then Australia took some more time and they signed in 2008, 9, in fact, 2009. So close to over 150, 160 countries had by then signed. But what I'm trying to say is that, if a major emitter like US tomorrow says, I don't want to, and then what happens to the corporate mission of so many US based companies? Let me put it
So,
that way.
as I mentioned that all the corporates who has committed and those who are feeling responsible, they are marching towards net zero.
Okay. So basically, there is nothing which is
No, so
binding or.
yes, there is nothing like binding. Everyone around the world is moving on their wishes. So if you talk about why companies are talking about net zero target, how why companies should reduce their emission, right? So one pressure is coming from their customer that okay, we would like, so like big companies like maybe if you talk about Chevron or maybe some companies like Microsoft or some companies like Pfizer, if they have some suppliers in India, they are saying their Indian suppliers that you have to reduce it. So we have some examples that they are saying that if you are not reducing your emission, we will not be buying from you, right? We have other options, right? That is one way of doing it, or you can say reducing it. Second is
That means that
like
in
some
international trade, Paris Agreement or net zero or CBAM can be used as non-tariff barriers at best. That is it.
CBAM is having a different kind of a connotation, or you can say different kind of a responsibilities. They are defining in a different way. So CBAM is something which will be impacting the business overall, right?
Okay.
And that is where EU as well as governments around the world are cautious about it. Like whether should we implement, and I mean whether should we implement, by when and how much. Earlier it was it was kind of if I'm not wrong, 50,000 company were coming in the purview of CBAM. Now it is just 10,000 or 5,000. When the number I am not remembering correctly, to 10,000, let's say. So that is the kind of a reduction that did happen due to this Trump and administration came, right? So the overall meaning is like CBAM or any other thing that is going to happen that will directly impact the world trade,
That
right?
that is what I was
And
trying
and and,
to.
and that is where countries will be negotiating with the EU, right? So that is
Mhm.
that is that is the kind of
So that is what I was trying to point out. Now that from 50,000 to say 10,000,
yes.
what is the binding and what is the infallibility of these agreements? But whilst we, during the course of our session today, when you highlight each of them, can you also tell us at the end, what the differences between each? Because I've noticed people tend to use these loosely. You know,
I mean, I did not really
Paris
last part.
agreement है वो net zero है वो, and
Uh,
then they don't know what, like you have to tell them what exactly are you trying to convey to us. So वो थोड़ा सा, like that is something which is the difference between each agreement basically.
yeah, so these are kind of, as of now, we will be talking about the Paris Agreement and the other agreements, and we will be talking about the differences in not in totality. You have to understand that Paris Agreement is very different from the net zero targets, right? So Paris Agreement just says that uh the increase in a temperature should be well below 2 degrees Celsius by 2100 and at max 1.5 degree by 2050, right? So that is the Paris Agreement. That is the whole this thing. Now they have a achieving mechanism, or you can say that is how they would like to achieve, right? So how will we achieving the 2 degrees Celsius target or 1.5 degrees Celsius target? So for that, we have a net zero emission targets. Like we should, if if all the countries is reaching net zero target by 2050, or most of the countries are reaching uh, net zero target by 2050, we will be able to restrict the global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrialization state, right? So that is what Paris Agreement says. Now, another uh, adding to it, Paris Agreement, after Paris Agreement or around, after Paris Agreement, countries started doing or starting coming up with their nationally determined contribution. That was one of the part that how can we achieve this one, like restricting ourselves or restricting emission by 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, right? So they started coming up with their nationally determined contribution. What do we mean by nationally determined contribution? So nationally determined contribution are those contributions that has been announced by the countries, right? So in case of India, so nationally determined contribution is India will not have any new coal power plant after 2035, right? So that is there. Second one is India's carbon intensity. We will be reducing carbon intensity by 45 degrees. Sorry, by 45% by 2030, right? That is the second one. Third one is renewable energy. So India will have a 500 gigawatt renewable energy capacity by 2030, right? So these are the things that India has committed. Similarly, other countries has also committed that, okay, they will be doing these things. So that is the way of reducing, or you can say achieving the global warming, right? Then the climate finance that came in picture, like, okay, if you would like to achieve all these things, we require finance, or developing country required finance. Hence, we should have some financial background or financial backups. And that is where all these 100 billions for developing countries support and mitigation adoption effort came in picture. Also last year, last year, loss and damage fund of $800 million that has been raised in I'm not sure, uh, Dubai. Dubai it was happening, or Abu Dhabi, I think. So Abu Dhabi, this COPs. So 2023 COPs. Okay. That was there, right? So that kind of a climate finance or key objectives that we wanted to achieve, right? So that is you can say that is the difference, or that is the way of understanding the Paris Agreement. In anything else, sir, if you don't mind, if you can elaborate, or if you would like to ask anything else.
Only thing is for NDCs, nationally determined contribution. Um, we have to take it. Each country will give, and at the end of every 1 year, they have to tell how much of the NDC they have been able to achieve. But
Yes.
I don't think there is any MRV in it, is it? Because China will never allow MRV. They have not been allowing it since 2005 onwards. I think we will just have to take each country at its face value and whatever it is like.
No, so what is happening, like Nestle determined contribution is being reported by different countries, right? If you talk
Mm.
about India, India has reported its national determined contribution in every 2 years after 2021 when we have announced. So 2023, we have given a status of a national determined contribution. Other countries are also reporting. We cannot say, or we cannot. I cannot come. I mean, what is it? Claim that they are reporting or not, but India has done once or twice.
But so there is no verification of whatever figures are being
No, no. So
reported.
that is where it is
MRV comes
like,
into place and then
no, no.
countries
So
will say our sovereignty
MRB.
is at risk.
So MRB is there because uh, in COPs there is a committee, and that used to what you say verify all the data that you are claiming.
Uh,
Whether it is, I mean, That is where you have to communicate everything in to the COPs, conference of parties, and there is a committee that takes care of all the communications, like how are you communicating, what you are communicating, and what kind of a status that you are having. So that is the whole process that COPs will be will have. I mean, every country has agreed on all these points, and there you will find the communication, or you have to communicate over there, and the committee will be verifying, or you can say they will be looking after the your claims.
What is that committee's name, sir?
So that is into COPs only, like COP committee or whatever. So if
Okay.
you look at the other, yeah. So I'll let you know like what is that committee name, but that is there.
It might be one of the working groups made by the COP.
Yeah, that is there, but that is responsibility of COPs only.
Okay.
I mean, conference of parties.
Right, sir. Thank you.
It is there. Another thing is like net zero targets and their significance. So we discussed. I mean, net zero target. So what do you mean? I mean, what do you mean by net zero target exactly? How do you think like it plays out? Or what do we mean by net zero target? I mean, because most of the people are having their what is it? They are having some doubts towards net zero target or net zero emissions. What do you mean by that?
Uh, if I want to define what net zero emissions are, maybe
You can
it
take an
is.
example. I mean,
Okay, so suppose one company is emitting suppose 20 tons of carbon or something like that. So uh, the impact what that company is bringing out. So how can that company reduce that carbon emission, or if suppose it is already reduced, what other ways the carbon emission can be reduced at a greater level? So is it something like that? I think carbon sequestration is one of the way where companies can help in reducing net zero target emissions, something like that.
okay, okay. So are you asking me? Uh,
Yeah, I'm just a bit
yes,
confused
yes, yes.
whether it is in a part of it or not.
It
But
is part of it.
just reducing or bringing it to neutrality, what the emission is coming from the company could be net zero.
Okay, okay. Anything else? Anyone?
Sir, it may be counterbalancing whatever the present emissions are there.
That is there. That is there. But the bigger part is so net zero target or net zero. So here we are talking about the GHG net zero. I mean, greenhouse gases, all the including all the greenhouse gases, we would like to make the net zero. Okay. So whatever emission we are emitting or emitting in atmosphere, the primary work or the primary demand from our different bodies that whatever we are doing, we should be reducing the carbon emission. So let us say that the same example, 20 tons. Okay. So 20 tons, if we are emitting, let's say company A is emitting 20 tons, and they are saying that they will be reaching net zero targets by so and so a year. Okay. So it means it means that company will try to reduce carbon emission as much as possible. Okay. And then after they will be talking about sequestration or offsetting. Okay. So net zero target says that you have to first reduce your carbon emission as much as possible. Right. And then after you can utilize the offset and other things, offset or everything, offset or carbon removal projects. Right. So that is a definition you can say. So carbon accounting, if you talk about the definitions, it is just when it is something like when you are just balancing whatever you are emitting and I mean releasing in the atmosphere and what you are sequestering in the atmosphere, right? Or whatever you are replacing from the atmosphere. But if you go deep down or talk about the practicalities, it says that when you start buying, or you can say start buying the carbon removal projects, or you start planting the trees and start sequestering that carbon emission, that may not be fulfilling, or that may not be sequestering all kind of a carbon emissions or all kind of a GHG emissions. Hence it is better to just reduce whatever GHG emission you are emitting. So let us say we are talking about CO2, right? CO2 can be sequestered, but what about CH4? Can we sequester it if we are not reducing it? That is not possible. On paper, you can say, right? Okay, I have converted CH4 into CO2 and then I have reduced it. On paper, it is okay. But when you look at the in a different lens or different practical lens, it is not possible, right? Hence, net zero always suggests, or it is always that we will be reducing GHG emission first, and then after we will, if let's say we have reduced that 20 tons to 5 tons, but we are not getting anything, or any technology is not invented as of now that we can reduce that 5 ton also, right? Hence, what we can do, we can use the carbon sequestration, plant different trees so that it can absorb all the emissions, all the GHG emission that is possible, right? So that kind of a approach that we can take, or that is what net zero used to demand, right? So that is the kind of that is the way of understanding net zero. Definition is very simple, that whatever you are emitting or whatever you are releasing in the atmosphere, that should be sequestered or removed from the atmosphere in the same year, right? So that is the way. So hope you got the overall idea of net zero target.
So net zero is basically the target which is set by the company, which is coming from the accounting, right?
Yes.
And if that amount of carbon is not being achieved at a particular point, like suppose you are saying that if technology is not able to fulfill or bring it to net zero, what the emission 20 ton was. So then after sequestration, that is what we also say as carbon or net zero.
So sequestration we have to do after that. So
Okay.
primarily you have to reduce it first.
All right.
And I told you, like, sequestration is something that is not possible for each and every gases, right? Carbon can be sequestered. CO2 can be uh, inhaled by the trees, but
Right.
CH4 cannot.
Oh,
Hence, it is recommended, or practically you should first reduce carbon, CH4, N2O, SF6, HF6 as much as possible, and then you have to offset it, or you have to sequester it. And that
okay.
after that, if you are achieving the net zero, after that, if you are counterbalancing all the emissions, that will be considered as a net zero target. So if you look at the different companies' target, there is another term called carbon neutrality, right?
Yeah.
And there is another term, net zero targets. So people used to confuse that, okay, what is the difference between carbon neutrality and carbon net zero target? Carbon neutrality is possible through sequestration. If you have a right kind of trees, and if you are planted in a way, then you will be able to achieve the carbon neutral status. If you look at the target of Microsoft, they will be carbon neutral by 2030, right? But
Right.
net zero, I think they are getting up to 2039, right? If I'm not wrong. So 2030 is their carbon neutrality target.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is
I
that
get
is
it
that
now.
is the difference between these two.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
So it is nothing. It is if you talk about the significance, it is about the tracking the report, avoiding the greenwashing that we all are hearing, and the policies and investor pressure that is coming up due to this Paris Agreement and others, and then the measurement for actions, like the different actions that we are taking in, right? So we have to anyway mitigate and measure and do everything. Hence, carbon neutral or net zero is very important. And that is where we require so many people to just calculate the carbon, then think about the strategy, then think about the policies, then think about the measurement, that how can we measure and track. So sir was mentioning about MRV. So measuring, reporting and verifying, right? So MRV is another keywords that are coming up, and that is where people are kind of coming up. So MRV is again the evolving world. Okay, so here is some numbers about the net zero target. So 140 countries placed to net zero target, right? And 5,000 companies has committed to net zero target. So they have committed that they will be achieving the net zero target by by let's say 2050 or 2035 or 2050 or 2040 or 2045. So they have committed that, okay, they will be achieving net zero targets by some year. Okay. Similarly, if we talk about more than 4,000 companies have committed or set the science-based target. So what is the difference between these two? The difference between these two is 5,000 are those companies whose verification did not happen, whether they are on a right track or not, right? Or another thing is whether they are committing or they have a roadmap or not for that. The 5,000 companies, whereas 4,000 company set a science-based target. So they are setting their targets according to the Paris Agreement. And that is what we know, or that is what we know as a science-based target. Okay, so 4,000 companies are doing it based on the Paris Agreement, that we will be reducing or we will be limiting our global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. And that is what their mission, or you can say that is what the science-based target is. Okay. Now, if you talk about other statistics, like 1,500 plus companies have validated net zero target as per Science-Based Target Initiative. Okay, Science-Based Target Initiative, as we were talking about, is one of the initiatives that has been taken, or that has come in picture after, I think, 2021 or 2020. That says that we are the one who has set all the long-term target and near-term target on the basis of a Paris Agreement, and hence we are calling it ourselves as a science-based target. So the best way that they are saying, or the best way that they are putting forward is they have given some tools and tech tools. I mean, if we talk about the tools, they have given some access. Through that you can be able to know that what is your net zero target, sorry, what kind of a reduction you need to make, right? So with their tools and tools, you will be able to identify that, okay, if my company is here right now, like let's say my company is emitting 10,000 ton of carbon this year, what kind of a reduction I need to make? 4%, 5%, 6% every year, or how much near-term target I would have, or how much long-term target that I would have, right? So that is what we used to get through the Science-Based Target Initiatives tools, right? Just give me a minute. So do you have any question, anything here?
So just one question on SBTI.
Yes.
What exactly would SBTI mean? Would it be any quantifiable system where, or rather any system which is quantifiable and can, be validated under some predefined tools or
Yes, so
mechanism?
this is a platform, an NGO like GRI and GHG protocol or every other platform that is there, and they are the one who has calibrated and researched based on the IPCC's research that, okay, if our ppm of a carbon, CO2, carbon dioxide, or CH4 and everything reaches or increase from a particular label. So let's say that label is 300 ppm or 400 ppm right now, right? So what kind of a reduction that we should make so that our global warming may not increase from, may not increase more than 1.5 degree centigrades uh, in a particular year, or you can say by 2050. So they aligned all the calculation based on the Paris Agreement, and that is what they are saying themselves, that okay, we are doing it everything on the basis of science, and hence they have named themselves or their organization as a science-based target, and it is validated, or you can say it is accepted by all the well-known uh, verification bodies, you can say, or the bodies who are into ratings, like EcoVadis. They used to accept their recommendations or net zero targets, uh, a sustainable one, or any other rating agency that you can talk about. So they will give extra marks when you are following, or when your target has been approved by the science based target. So you can just imagine the gravity, or the kind of seriousness that they have. They rejected the science-based target initiative or science-based target of Unilever, one of the biggest FMG company around the world, right? So they have, kind of rejected their science-based target because that is not according to the Paris Agreement, or that is not according to their sectoral emissions. Whereas if we talk about the Indian companies like Wipro got approved. So that is the kind of approval, or you can say approval mechanism or verification mechanism they have. The people are believing on them. So hope I answered your question, sir.
Yeah, so that means this is more under the Paris Agreement. Am I correct? In the sense, whatever targets the Paris Agreement would enforce, I mean, in whatever it will enforce, any country or company which wants to adhere to that will have to give a SBTI achievable target.
So
I
just to
hope
correct one, yeah. So everything is right, but it is about it is just about the companies, not countries.
not countries, okay. And once the targets have been validated by SBTI, basically what I understand is SBTI is doing the MRV for each country, each corporate which is giving its own target.
Yes, yes,
Right.
kind of, yes.
Now, where do we get any comprehensive, reliable data that okay, this country had this target and according to SBTI it was achieved or it
So
was
if you just type SBTI and approved targets by company list, so you will find a link where probably you will just filter it out, that approved targets. You will
okay.
find the almost 1,500 or 2,000 list. 2,000
And
companies
and
listed there.
this is under the Paris Agreement, not under any other thing like net zero
No, no.
or
Yes, so according to Paris Agreement, we have to achieve net zero by 2050. That is how we can, or that is how we can achieve the Paris Agreement, right? So if we would like to achieve the Paris Agreement, or you can say if we would like to restrict our global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have to follow the 2050 net zero target.
and this is
That
also
is
applicable for carbon neutrality or no?
no, not carbon neutrality. It is not applicable to carbon neutrality. It is purely about the net zero target.
Okay, thank you.
Now let us talk about the emission trading system. You might be aware about emission trading system. How many of you are aware? If you are aware. So emission trading system is kind of a money that you have, and the way you are spending it, right? So here government has given you a cap that, okay, you should not exceed that particular emission cap, right? And if you emit that cap, you may have to pay price, right? So that is the overall idea, that if you are emitting, or if you are exceeding the cap limit, then you have to pay the price, or you have to buy the carbon credits from the peers. Okay. So here, let us consider that there is a company called A, there is a company called B, there is a company called C. Okay. And they are in the same industry. They are in the same industry and they are primarily working under the cap and trade system, cap and trade mechanism. So, and the government has given a similar cap to them. Like, they have to emit at max 100 tons of carbon emission in a particular year, 2024, right? So in that particular year, has happened with uh, what has happened with the company A? They have emitted 120 tons. Company B has emitted 90 tons. Company C has emitted 110 tons, right? So according to the cap, they will have to achieve the net zero target, or you can, sorry, not a net zero, they have to achieve, or they have to limit their emission by 100 tons of, I mean 100 tons for each company, right? And here we are saying that A is exceeding by 20 tons, B has negative 10 tons, and C has a, again, exceeding by 10 tons. Okay. So what will, or what kind of a trade can happen between these countries, or among these, sorry, not countries, among these companies, is C may be buying from B, or maybe A buying from B, like 10 tons of a carbon. Okay. And they can offset that carbon. Okay. They can offset that carbon, and the remaining 20 tons that is there with the, let's say, there is a company A. So for that 20 tons, he has to pay some penalty, so that government can do some work with that penalty. And that is what we mean, or that is what we used to do with a carbon, with a carbon cap and trading mechanism. What companies B has gained is they got the reward for restricting herself within the 100 tons of emissions, right? So 10 tons of emission has been traded in the market, and that, since both of these companies were requiring the 10 tons of a carbon emission, hence it might be, there is a possibility that they have gain a lots of money through that. So in general, if we talk about the cap and trade mechanism, or ETS, on an average trading price or carbon price that is coming in EU ETS, that is going from, I mean, $30 to $50 per ton of a carbon emission. So here, if we are talking about the 10 tons, that means 300 minimum and 500 maximum uh, dollar of emission, right? Sorry, dollar of carbon credit. So that kind of a price, or that kind of a finances that can gather while reducing their emissions. Okay. So that is the mechanism, or that is the whole way of calculating or reducing the carbon. Sorry, this is the whole mechanism. Now the question comes, like, from where this 100 came, like $100, why government has kept is like $100 cap, sorry, 100 tons of carbon emission cap, right? So that cap came due to the due to the net zero targets that the country has. So country wants to achieve the net zero targets, hence they are keeping cap on that particular industry, and hence that industry has to reduce the emission linearly, or maybe they may be giving the flexibility. Initially, what was happening with EU ETS, that they were giving some incentive to their companies that, okay, if you are doing something or doing this kind of a thing, then you will be, you will be getting support from the government, and they were doing that. But slowly and gradually they have reduced, they have they have kind of a withdraw all those money, and now they are trying to uh, reduce it linearly, trying to reduce based on the cap and trades mechanism, and they are trying to reduce it linearly, like they are now trying to reduce it 4% per year, right? 4% emission per year. So that is their targets. Okay, so by 2050 they have to reach the emission, they have to reach the net zero targets, and hence they have put in their emissions or their targets like that, or cap like that. So slowly and gradually they will be doing. So hope you got some idea about the emission trading mechanism and why we require it.
Sir, is it only in US and Europe right now?
Right now, ETS is with the EU, UK, South Korea, Japan, Peru also, I think.
Not US.
That is not US.
Okay. And is it mandatory or left to
So
companies to
it is
choose?
a mandatory one. Like whatever you can see carbon credits through Vera or Gold Standards, those were a voluntary market that we used to call it. It is a compliance market. That every the another thing is, government will be deciding on which industry will come in this periphery or the purview, and those industries should have a cap and trade system, or they will be following the cap and trade system, right? So that is where, if you can see, limit the targets, encourage the cost effective reduction, then promote the innovations. So to achieve all those things, they will have to promote the innovation. Then it is also creates the economic value, generates some revenue out of it, and then the supporting the net zero and climate targets, right? So that is the whole, you can say, purpose of this emission trading system.
And so this creating an economic value for carbon or supporting net zero and the climate targets, this means that the ETS is like the SBTI under the Paris Agreement, or is there any other?
No. So it is like government is saying to different industries that you have to reduce it because we would like to achieve net zero target. So government is coming up. SBTI is just a NGO, and we cannot draw parallel between, because if you are not following SBTI, there is no problem. But if you are not following the government rules, then you will be penalized.
Okay, so this is only for those countries which you mentioned, UK
As
and
of now,
EU.
like as I was talking about, India is going to start its ETS, and we know it as a CCTS, Carbon Credit Trade Scheme, or
That will be next year, right?
yeah, 2026.
Okay. But so that is not what I mean to say, is that what you're saying is all individual government based. It is not under a global treaty of any sort, like
So
unlike the Kyoto
as I am
Protocol.
saying, it is coming out, or it is just to achieve net zero target. So net zero target and Paris agreements are global treaty, and hence most of the countries are working towards reduction. I think China also started this year or last year, emission trading system. So I'm not aware, or you can say I'm not remembering it, but yeah, they have also done something in that direction.
So China, okay, but China is not, what do you say, credibility is quite doubtful, in China's case, because
Sir, credibility, I do not know. It is from the waste or anywhere else. But whatever you were seeing as of now, every products and everything. Earlier, people were just used to talk about they have bad products and everything. But now they are competing with the best.
I mean, that
So
is
this is about, I do not know. whether it is coming from other narratives or what, but um, they are doing much more better in terms of uh, climate also, because they have started phasing out their coals. And it is not like they released some pictures, the newses are coming in Reuters or Financial Times or everywhere, right? So we cannot say that their credibility or something like that. I'm not sure, but yes, the way they are progressing and the way they are innovating themselves, I do not think that they require a different kind of communication. There might be a possibility, but people were thinking about them like they are liars and they do everything in a different way. But the way they have progressed, the way they come and confront the governments and Trump governments, and the way they are dealing with the different countries, that is at a different level. Their innovation is at a different level right now. So in some IT, or you can say quantum mechanism, they are either competing with US or they are ahead of US. If you look at the blockchain or quantum computers or AI or something like that. So they are there. Earlier, people were saying that they are only in hardwares. No, they are in softwares too now. So time, I do not know. I mean, the credibility also has, they have a, why do you think all these waste are, I mean, they are just doing bad mouthing on the other hand, and they are trying to buy everything from the China only, not even India.
Mhm.
So they are doing something. That is
But
why
so
people are.
their past attitude and the sustained, consistent reaction to that, over the past decade and a half, 2 decades, has been like, okay, this is what we have done, this is what it is, but we are not going to sort of give any kind of proof or validation towards it. So zero MRV towards this, and you take it on our face value. And the way they approach the regular issues on politics or business or whatever is how they approach this in climate. Without, they just throw the figures at you and expect everyone, the world, to take it without any kind of sort of validation. So
Yes, yes.
that is
They
why
they are the one. I mean, if you look at uh, no country around the world refused Google or
yeah.
YouTube or something, but they have invented their own, and they did the right thing, because why should US listen everything from our country? Why?
Uh.
Why should we rely on Google or Azure or AWS? Why should not have our own?
Correct.
So I mean that is a different thing, sir. But let's talk about, yeah. Let's talk about the last one is like CBAM. So I mean that is politics that we. So CBAM is another mechanism probably that is there, and they are trying to fix all those leakages, like what they are saying, or the background or story you can say behind this uh, mechanism or the program or carbon tax, whatever you say, is EU would like to reduce their carbon emission in their scope 3, right? So what was happening or what is happening, like when EU were tracking all those companies who were manufacturing in their region or their boundary, but they were not able to reduce the emission or measure them. I mean, reduce the emission from the company who are either manufacturing in China or India or Malaysia or Thailand or maybe Vietnam. They were not able to reduce any emission from them. Now, what was happening, like one company who is good at marketing and manufacturing, they have a very good plant in EU, they started facing heat from the EU on the basis of a carbon emission. Now what they did, they started reducing their manufacturing, or you can say the number of toys or number of technology or any kind of a thing that they were producing in EU, right? And they started shifting their production from EU to other Asian countries. And due to that, they were able to reduce their carbon within the boundary of EU, right? So since that company was taking everything from here, I mean, they were producing or they were emitting the emission in Asia, and the impact they were facing in Europe as well as around the world. Hence, they were saying that it is a carbon leakage and we should prevent that. Okay. So with that mechanism or with that kind of a background, or you can say mindset, they have come up with this carbon border adjustment mechanism. If any, so they are not directly saying or they are not directly penalizing to the exporter, they are directly penalizing the importer, right? So whomsoever is importing any kind of a product in EU, they will have to match the carbon emission that is coming out from the EU industries, right? And if the carbon label is same, they will not have to pay any extra amount. If carbon emission is more than the average label, you have to pay, or you have to pay some price to the EU, European Union, right? And that is what the whole mechanism is. It is not about penalizing the right product. It is about, if you are not following the global norms and if you are not reducing your carbon emission, then you have to pay the price, or your importer has to pay the price. You will not be paying any price. When importer starts paying the price, they will be asking you to reduce the emission, right? And once you are, I mean, if you are not reducing it, what will they can do? The third step is they can change the importer, or sorry, exporter, right? So they can change the exporter. And that is what the way of reduction is. And that is what they, I mean, that is what the EU would like to, uh, EU would like to have, like the reduction in a global emission, because it is not I mean, only EU responsibility, or only US, or only UK, or only India's responsibility. It is everyone's responsibility. Hence, they have started one thing, right? Other countries may reciprocate, right? They are not saying that you should not reciprocate, but other countries may be not able to compete or something like that. So hence, we need to again wait and watch till, let's say, 2030, 2035, that what kind of other regulations are unfolding, right? So this is one of the future uh, plan that we are having, okay, in EU. Like it will also going to implement from 26 to 29, right? So within 3 years. So I mean, it will start in 2026. Then it is spread towards, I mean, to till 2029, right? So that is what the whole crux, or you can say uh, the purpose of CBAM. Okay. So hope you got some idea. And that is why we should be careful, or we should be thinking about reducing our carbon emission if we are a manufacturer, and sending our products to EU nations. Any question here? Anything? So if you look at all these things, like prevent the carbon leakage, level playing field, encourage the global climate action that is there, and support the EU climate targets, right? So all these purpose is being fulfilled through this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Any question, anything? So what kind of roles and responsibility that will come after, or that will be there if all these things are happening, and that all these things are taking place? So these kind of rules and regulation you can think of, like GHG inventory specialist, a strategy expert, carbon trading specialist, carbon trading producers, or assurance experts, or maybe the carbon credit analyst or managers, different kind of a manager, right? So that is there. Now, what will be happening in the master class? So what this master class will be transformative basically. So it will transform yourself from not knowing anything to know something in terms of a carbon accounting, right? And how can you calculate the carbon? Second purpose of this transformative master class is uh, how to create your opportunity. So transform yourself for waiting for a job to create an opportunity for your own, right? And the third thing is like transform yourself from a job seekers to job provider, right? So that is the objective of that master class. That is the way that that is what we are going to discuss in those master class, like on 25th. Yep. So hope I'll be able to see you in the master class, right? So hope you will be attending the master class and continue learning your carbon accounting. So any question, anything till here? Anything?
Sir, in your last slide, actually the CBAM slide, the left bottom, encourage global climate action, it talks about carbon pricing term. Could you talk a little bit more about carbon pricing? I know ETS is one of the ways a carbon pricing is done. I don't know if it's possible to do it in this class or not, but some elaboration about shadow pricing, if possible.
Uh, if you talk about carbon pricing, so shadow pricing and other things are there is you rightly mentioned ETS is one way. Another way is people are talking about your cost of carbon emission. That is in the internal carbon pricing. Shadow carbon pricing, I'm not sure. So internal carbon pricing, people use are talking about like how much emission you have reduced in this year. So let's say 10,000 ton of emission that you are emitted last year. Now you are emitting 9,900 tons of emission, right? And you have spent, let's say, 10,000 rupees on the emission reduction. Okay. So for reducing 100 tons of emission, you have you have spent 10,000 rupees, right? It means for 1 ton reduction of 1 ton, your cost is like 1,000, right? No, 100 rupees, right? So 100 rupees for 1 ton reduction. Okay, so that is how internal carbon pricing we used to calculate. So I do not have, I mean, very sound understanding about the carbon pricing, and the whatever I have just read through, that is the definition. Like one is like ETS, that is correct, but shadow pricing I'm not aware.
I think shadow pricing is also used as a term interchangeably for internal pricing, which you just explained. So it's basically the cost incurred by organization to reduce carbon, right?
Right.
Emissions. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any other question, anything? Okay, then if everything is fine, we'll meet on 25th May, 10:30 a.m. So that we'll have a different time. So see you then. See you
Thank
there.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone
Thank-
for your time.